Hello, everyone. My name is Saba Atif. I will be presenting the updates to EQuiS Enterprise 7. The agenda for today that I will be covering are the development focus for Enterprise 7, dashboard improvements, map widget editor updates, the scatter plot widget, REST API using Swagger, responsive design, EIAs, and covering licensed roles. The focus of our development team when working on Enterprise 7 was primarily to improve performance. They wanted to improve the map widget, the responsive design of Enterprise to be able to be viewed from mobile units and desktops, and also for a usable REST API. This is the overall view of how all of our products relate to our database. Enterprise fits in over here, and as well as our dashboards and widgets to present the data. The improvements that have been made to the dashboard are primarily with building a dashboard. The gear option is your primary source of making changes. Click on the gear icon to edit the entire dashboard. The most important feature for dashboards is now you can add a widget anywhere in any section in any column in the same interface. You can now move the widgets and sections around much more easily than in previous versions. You can set a dashboard facility. You can also change themes, and you can also set a favorite dashboard. This is an example dashboard that I have set up here. If you click on the gear icon, you have the options to edit, new, copy, or delete. I want to quickly go back just for 1 second so that you have this screenshot available as well. So the gear icon is where you would make all the changes. You would select the gear icon to, again, edit your dashboard, create a new dashboard, copy it, and or delete. Again, all of these are depending on based on your permissions. The dashboard improvements you can see here, I'll show in the demo as well. The star to select your favorites for easy access to all of your dashboards. The little droplet icon to change your theme. The setting a dashboard facility. And the little plus icon that you will see will either be to add a widget and or adding columns. And the most important of all, click Save to save your dashboard. So let's go ahead and edit the dashboard here. As you can see, you can add your section titles. You can toggle this as a favorite. This dashboard theme, you can change the different colors that are available here. You can edit the heading and select your dashboard facility. And if you scroll down, you can add sections here. And you can also add a widget by clicking this, and the widget chooser will appear. This dynamically appearing, as you type in what widget you're looking for, the functionality has improved significantly where that widget will or dashboard will appear, or widget will appear in this chooser primarily. So you can add a widget through that. You can also click and add a new column. I'll scroll down here and show you that if I click this little plus icon here, I can add a new column. I can add a widget in place in this location compared to before where where the widget will appear at the top and you had to move it to the location. Here you add the widgets or columns in place. And again, continue to add sections, adding names. New section will be created. You can add widgets. Moving back to the next change is changes to the map widget. There has been improvement in performance, so there's much better performance in the map widget. You can change the base maps in the map widget. You can zoom to layer, change the visible layers through the map widget. The control of the layout tools has changed, and also the backend is that it now uses the Esri JavaScript API 4.x which is a new layer type and a new functionality from Esri. So the new widget now has these op buttons right here, where you can select base map from here and you can change. You can select your legends from here, you can change them. You can view your legend here. You can also select to toggle the locations on and off here as well. So if you go into our map widget, you can change the base map, for changing it from topography to imagery, streets. So that changes here. They can be turned on and off at this location from that part of the widget. You can also view your layers here once they're set up. You can click the little 3 dots and zoom to this layer. Then you can also, by just clicking on the layer itself, you will be able to, the little eye button pretty much grays out when you don't see that layer, and clicking it back on, the dark eye indicates that layer is visible. So you can do the same thing here as well. And that's an option from there. The other option in the map widget, now you can go in and edit your widget from here as well. So now, moving on, the changes to the map widget editor, the updates that have been made are primarily to the layers, the symbology, and the user interface. The most important of all, which we want to very, very primarily highlight, is that you can completely edit the layer after setting it up. You can modify all the properties of a layer using the JSON editor for layers. We now have more complex rendering options, which is access to the ArcGIS Arcade. The URL is here, developers.arcgis.com/arcade, which is a scripting language developed by Esri, which uses formulas and calculations inside of value definitions. Now, in the map widget editor, under the layers section, you have the option to now delete, edit, and add various layers. So you would select your layer that you would like to edit, and you can make the changes here. And you can have multiple layers. Every single one of them is now editable. In the symbology section, we can see that the editor portion, if you click the gear icon, you can modify all of the properties of the layer. The JSON editor for symbol from the Esri symbol playground is used here. In the user interface, you can set the positioning of the tools. You can turn off wheel scroll events like mouse wheel, click and drag. So for example, in the map widget, when you scroll over it, it zooms in and out. To avoid that, you can uncheck the mouse wheel option so that it will not scroll. One thing to note, which is missing, which has not yet been implemented, is that the histogram and the clustering, which were available in version 6, are not in version 7 as a functionality, because that functionality is not available in the Esri JavaScript API 4.x. As you can see, this is the user interface. The checkboxes are available to enable your legend, the layer list, the base map gallery, and the map events of the mouse wheel and the clicking option are here as well. So in the map widget, the layer option, you can edit the layers. So once you open and scroll down, select your layer. And if I click the edit button, it now expands to allow me to make any changes to the report itself. So I can modify this by clicking the gear icon, making any changes to any of the parameters. And most important of all, either save or save as. I'm going to close out for right now. And you can add multiple layers. So for example, if I do want to add another layer, you can click the plus icon. And now I can add another user report, select any report. and modify my changes as needed in here. The symbology portion, if you click on the new symbol, the parameter, like I showed in the image before, you would make the changes here. And again, the user interface can be enabled, disabled. You can change the click option, the map event for mouse wheel, or to drag and drop can all be changed in this section over here. Moving on to the next topic, which is the scatter plot widget. One of the key functionalities of the scatter plot widget is the ability to connect data points. You can compare numeric columns from cross-tab reports. You can plot concentrations of two different chemicals to infer correlations. You can then input the input data needed to produce a chart is a set of value pairs. And you can use a published crosstab to configure the row headers, which automatically creates the pairs. The scatter plot widget is under development right now, as we're correct. Apologize. Yeah. So it's still under development at the moment. So we are still working on this, on the widget itself. As you can see here, the scatter plot widget appears, and you can display two similar analytes and compare them one to another on the x-axis and the y-axis. The next topic that we want to cover is the REST API using Swagger, which you can access this user interface by adding /Swagger to the end of the URL. The Swagger documentation is human or machine readable for the REST API. The human portion allows the users to play all the REST APIs, the user interface tools to use them. The machine portion, example Microsoft Flow, can understand the API and build complex workflows that include the API. The API is documented in an interactive way. You have to be an administrator and logged in to the enterprise site, enterprise login, and then you can connect to the Swagger by adding Swagger. Everyone can access Swagger, but only administrators can actually pull the data from Swagger. So the API, for example, gets the data from the database itself. So if you select get, to example, the API for facilities to get all of the facilities, if I select try it out, what happens is it will pull all of the facility information from the database and display it here. So you can test out all the different API functionalities that are pulling the data from the database itself. And they have various requirements. So if I look at facility ID, if I know a facility ID, I can enter that information here. For example, 494, I think might work. If I try it out, it will pull the information for that facility, for that specific facility in this response body section. The REST API is available for all these different categories. Facilities is example, groups, loggers, modules, reports, etc. This can be accessible and this can be used in by clients to pull the specific data as long as they have permission, the correct credentials to pull the data, the various data which require the different entry points, values can be entered here, and then the data can be outputted using this REST API. Again, like we said, you would add Swagger at the end of the URL, and all the APIs for that site will be displayed. This is just an example. If you want to look for reports, enter the report ID, facility ID, for example, and it will pull the data from the database. Again, all the response messages are here. What the database uses to actually see all of the data, to reply back. It will honor all of the entries and then will give back the correct responses. The next thing that we want to talk about is the responsive design, how you can view your site on various mobile devices. So one quick example of how to see what your site will look like on a mobile device is, for example, in Chrome, we can use the developer tools. I'm going to hit F12 and console. Let me clear everything out here. If I click this little toggle device, what that does is it will display my site on a mobile device. If I click the drop down, for example, how would it look on a Galaxy S5? Or how would it look on an iPhone? Let's do an iPhone 7, 8X. And then you have this little circle option as if you are scrolling on a phone. This is how all of your widgets will appear. You can also rotate it to see how that will display when you're looking at it sideways. Or an iPad. So you can get an idea of when you're setting up your dashboard, if your users are going to be on mobile devices. This is a very good way to see how your data will be presented so that you can arrange your dashboard accordingly for them to access. Double click that back, and we are now back to our presentation style on dashboard layout. The next important feature is EIAs. We now have updated processes where multiple EIAs can now be generated for every single report. We are no longer tied to one EIA per widget. You can create multiple EIAs for every single, for every report. So you would select the report, click on the gear to select your report properties, select the EIA button to create an EIA, and when that opens up, click on the Create New EIA Agent, and the EIA tab will now appear with all of the usual options to select, including do not create a notice if there are no report results and do not send an email to notice recipients. Then once you set up one EIA, you can always go back into the report again and click on the option to create a new EIA agent to create multiple EIAs. So if I take this report as an example, click on the drop down to edit this widget. Here at this point, I want to use the same report but create another EIA. I already have one EIA that I can always use and modify as needed. Or I can click on this icon, radio button, to create a new EIA agent. And then I can have that set up. Let's have this run once. Do not create this result. And I, of course, hit save, which is very important. Save. You can create multiple EIAs in here. So that's a very important feature. Moving along to licensed roles. In Enterprise 7, licenses are added to the database. The product license roles are then created when you deploy using action equals deploy at the end of your URL. You then assign a user to the product license role along with an enterprise ALS role. The user is not active until they are made a member of the product license role. So under Role Manager now, you will have your various licenses listed as so. It will also tell you the number of users that are consuming the licenses. The value at the end here indicates the number of licenses that you have and the number of users assigned to that role, which means consuming those licenses. So if I go into my role manager, you can see my licenses are here. For a user, let me grab a test. Okay. I need to assign them to a enterprise role and then also give them access to any other roles along with it. So for example, data submitter. Yep. Save the user there. So that's a new change. So you have to assign a role for that user to actually be active. The new way to now deactivate a user, if I take my user one more time, is to take them off a role or license, and that will deactivate the user. Important thing to note here, there's another option to impersonate the user is now listed up here in the top drop down. And the option to disable a user means you're going to permanently disable this user. So you want to use the disable unless the user will no longer be working anymore. For example, they've left the company, you can disable the user that way. However, if you want to just deactivate and activate as previously, you would just add them to the role or take them off the role of the license role, and that will deactivate the user itself. And that's the end of my presentation here at the moment. We can go over to questions if anyone has any questions, but here are the upcoming series in EQuIS 7. We'll just open the floor to questions.
Awesome. Thanks, Saba. We have a question from Michael, and he's asking, during the upgrade to 7, will all existing users automatically be assigned to an enterprise role, or will this have to be done manually?
Hi, Michael. This is Jerome. I'm on the development team, and I'd like to field that question. If you are upgrading an existing EQuIS environment, the upgrade will automatically create the license role and assign all of your active users to that role, assuming there are enough licenses available.
All right. Good to hear, he says. I'm not sure I understand your question, Randy. May 17th. It is, oh, Randy asks, what if you have core licenses?
We're trying to phase out the core licenses. That said, they do still work. Those accounts will still be recognized, licensed. The challenge that comes in here is Randy, I have to confess, I haven't personally tested this and I'm a little confused. I believe what will happen is that the license group will be created and all the users transferred into it, and that group becomes unlimited. But I haven't actually talked to our QA department and verified that that's what in fact will happen. It may be that we need to change how your core license is implemented from in the past, core licenses were managed with a text file in C program data or soft EQuIS config. In 7, we'd really like to transfer those into the network. They still act as unlimited users. So they behave like a core license, but they avoid a lot of little pitfalls. So it's possible that we'll have to migrate and give you new keys for that.
Okay. It sounds like Randy asked this question maybe in the beta, and that Matt is looking into it as well. So,
Okay.
Kelly asks, will the drill down widget functionality be improved for version 7? Currently, they can't control the sort on the x-axis.
I don't know if we've addressed that. I know it's an open issue. Hopefully it's a 7.0. If not, it'll probably end up being a 7.1. But I'm going to ask my my technologists on the call here to help me be honest on that and double check to make sure that we have an open case on that.
This is Brian Bingham, product team coordinator for Enterprise, and yeah, that's an open case. We're not going to have a fix for the sort in 7.0, but it's in the pipeline to be fixed and improved for a subsequent release. And just so people know that those releases are not going to be at the same pace as the 7.0 release. We're going to be much more accelerated. So these fixes and things that people have been waiting for, we won't have to, thinking 6 months, 12 months out. And we're looking much closer to a much more accelerated release cycle.
Awesome. Kelly says, thank you. Randy clarified his question about May 17th earlier. Yes, we had the first series in our EQuIS 7 in 7 office hours was on EnviroInsite. And so if you weren't able to attend that, I can certainly send you the recording link. We have those, and I was going to send those out to registrants today. And if you're interested in checking out next week's session, that is going to be on Edge. I just put in the chat window a registration link there. And if you want to check out the full schedule of the office hours, the rest of the 7 in this series, you can go to our office hours schedule page, which I also just stuck in the chat, and you kind of check out all of the various sessions. So do go over there and sign up for the others if you haven't already, because we're excited to talk about all the changes that are coming in 7.
I'd actually like to clarify something that Saba covered.
Sure.
Everything in Enterprise 7 goes through the API. So if we haven't in a widget, there's an API endpoint to manage that same data. She had mentioned that you had to be an administrator to access that, and the truth is that many of those endpoints require that you be an administrator. For example, changing configuration data. You can see the endpoints, you can get most of the data, but you can't use the API to change it unless you have an administrator login to do so. But any user can come to this UI and explore the endpoints. That URL at the top can be fed to a lot of external systems like Microsoft Flow. There's some authentication issues that may not be available until 7.1 for things like Microsoft Flow, which assumes open auth. But the API endpoints actually recognize the logged in user's permissions. So if I go to the facilities endpoint and return facilities, I'm only going to see facilities I have permission to view. But if I wanted to write my own script or program that went into the facilities and queried it, my program would have whatever permissions I have as a logged on user. Because I'm accessing it as me. So that's kind of an important detail. This interface that we're looking at is really just for exploring it. But the endpoints themselves are documented here as the URLs. So you can go in and look and see what URL do I need to access to get to this endpoint, what kind of data is it returning. But I think the important point is that we use this API as well. There's no smoke and magic in the web application. It's all AngularJS, and it's all accessing these endpoints. These endpoints, this whole API is also extendable. Things like sample planning module get implemented through here. EQuIS Live will be implemented through here, and they'll show up as new endpoints as they come online. It's also possible if you want to write your own endpoint. I foresee that sometime in the not too distant future, there may be an advanced user workshop that covers how to expand the EQuIS API and to include some of your own capabilities. So that's all there. I think one more important point in here is that I'm particularly proud of is reporting. In the past, reporting has been a bit of a challenge for very large reports that have long run times. You'll find that the web server times out before your report is completed. That's all now completely asynchronous, and it will try for 4 minutes to run the report, and if it doesn't complete by then it automatically falls over to the workflow service to generate the report in the background. And as long as you keep looking for it, eventually it will show up.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Jerome. We have another question. From Matt saying, is EDP handled with this API as well, or is that a separate server process?
The answer to that is yes and yes. EDP, so there's the EQuIS 6 has an API endpoint that standalone EDP uses for sign and submit. That endpoint will continue to exist in 7 point whatever for at least the short term. This EDP endpoint will eventually replace it, so you can submit EDPs to this endpoint right now. I've actually done that with Microsoft Flow by putting an EDD into a Dropbox folder. And Flow picked it up out of Dropbox and submitted it to this endpoint. And the EQuIS workflow service, which has been around since Enterprise 3.0, still remains and is still the process that still is the program that will process that EDP, that EDD. So workflow remains. It becomes available through this API. Some of the changes in workflow include changes to things like sleep seconds, which in the past you had to keep at very large values. In 7, we fixed that, so you can set sleep seconds down to very small values and keep your processor busier. We've also added the ability to have multiple agents for generating reports. So it's not one report after another. I can have 5 or 10 or however many threads I've got in my server cranking out reports. I can do that for reporting. I can also now support multiple FTP servers or multiple email retrieval agents. And changes to those agents are now dynamic. In the past, if I changed the workflow service configuration, I had to go log into the server and restart the workflow service. It now automatically pulls the database configuration and restarts agents as on demand. Did I answer your question?
I think you did. That's really neat to hear, Jerome. Thanks. He said, great, I'll look forward to playing around with them and submitting EDDs via the API with version 7. So good, yes. We have another, the most popular question, I think, is do we have a release date yet? And we're still shooting for spring 2018. We're, doing in the, still working on the beta. We still have the beta test going on. So, but hopefully very soon. All right. It looks like, oh, Kathleen says, sounds like a lot more throughput is possible.
Yeah, that was one of our goals in 7 is to improve performance and improve throughput.
One interesting thing too is that one of the changes we've done with that endpoint was that we load directly to SD file registration. There's no more of this sending an EDD into a box on the server if you're doing a web upload. So workflow doesn't pick up a file out of a folder on the server. It goes straight to the database and gets it out of there. And
Right.
What this is going to do is, especially for clients with a lot of data going into the database, a lot of traffic, we can spin off workflow into its own separate process, and it can be still getting to the database. It can still see the database. It doesn't have to know about a server, another server, and trying to access another server's directory. So it should really allow for, as Kathleen said, a lot more throughput.
So, and to be clear, that's true if you use this endpoint. If you're using the legacy sign and submit endpoint, that still goes to a drop folder. Same thing with FTP retrieve and email retrieve. Those that will go directly to database, probably 7.1. Hopefully by 7.1, but that's not going to make it in 7.0. Sorry about that, Brian.
Well, I was just going to, to paint a little bit of rosier thing. You're correct in all that except for the EDP submit.asmx. That endpoint will load directly to the database. That's no different than a website. Yep.
Great. So Matthew says this is all great stuff. Very much looking forward to improved EDD handling coming with version 7. And then Randy asked, so does professional EDP use the new endpoint or the old one in like EDP, the desktop application?
Professional EDP does not use the endpoint. It actually does.
You're talking sign and submit, but if you're just talking loading, it doesn't use a web endpoint.
Correct. So sign and submit would still go through the endpoint. But if I just open up an EDD in professional and do create commit, that goes directly into the database over a database connection.
Okay. What about Express EDP?
Express EDP would be
same thing as Pro.
Yeah, same thing as Pro.
Okay.
The big difference in the Express EDP is that it minimizes the user interface to give you more process memory for larger EDDs.
Okay. Kathleen said she'd like to see some, she would love to see some release notes on this. So thank you, Kathleen. We'll have those, I think, when the release drops. Is that right, Brian?
Yeah, as soon as we get things like that, Kathleen, like we talked about in some of the beta stuff, we'll get those out in front of everybody. But at the latest, it would be as the release comes. But yeah, if we have more documentation as we're getting that on, I confess we've been pretty consumed with developing, and we're now catching up on our documentation. So as soon as we get that stuff put together, we'll be getting that out, making it available also in the beta stuff as well.
Awesome, thanks. One more question from Randy. How can we open up the faster endpoint for users? Back to the EDP question.
I'm not sure what you mean. How can we open up the endpoint for users? So if I upload an EDD through the 7.0 widget, it goes directly through this new EDP endpoint. The sign and submit, Brian has clarified for me, it's not listed here, but it also goes directly into memory.
Randy asked to be unmuted so he can clarify. So there you go, buddy.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
There we go.
So basically what I was wondering here is can users submit very large EDDs to this endpoint directly? And it sounds like you're saying you can do that if you do the web upload method through Enterprise 7?
The short answer is yes. The long answer has to do with what do you mean by very large? And let me clarify that. The web and IIS and other web servers impose seemingly arbitrary limitations on how large a file I can upload. So this endpoint is looking to upload a file as one big upload stream. That may or may not be feasible given the network between the user and the server.
Right, because we've got...
Right, EQuIS has no control over that.
Yeah, we've got lots of users trying to upload large EDDs, let's say to the tune of hundreds of thousands of records in there.
Right.
And as of right now, we don't really have a good answer for them to get it processed quickly, right?
Now, the sign and submit endpoint actually does block uploads. So instead of trying to upload a 50 megabyte file all in one stream, it will upload it, I think it's 4K at a time. So that will allow you to upload a very large EDD, sign and submit, that you wouldn't otherwise be able to just upload directly. And that's really kind of the best suggestion I have for you in terms of dealing with a very large EDD. Is to use sign and submit.
Okay. All right, thanks.
That feature will find its way into this endpoint at some point. Or maybe a variation of this into the API as a different endpoint is another possibility. Because I really like to be able to handle that large file.
Okay, Kathleen asks bulk EDD loader. I don't know if you wanted to be unmuted, Kathleen, to clarify that. Sure. Okay, here we go. All right, you're unmuted.
We're in the same boat with these monster EDD files in 6.6, and the help desk suggested using the bulk EDD loader feature under professional. I don't know if that is an option that might help.
It's something that might help. I believe what you're referring to is has to do with the SQL submission. I can either submit an EDD line by line, or I can submit it in bulk to SQL Server. The bulk submits are much faster, but they don't always succeed for a very large EDD.
Well, I think what Kathleen's talking about is the bulk EDD loader form that is available in Pro, and that does go much faster. It loads it line by line, but it's really fast because you're doing hardly any checking. So your EDD has to be really in tip-top shape. It's not for an EDD that's filled with ref file errors or something like that. You want to have that EDD cleaned up and ready to go, and then the bulk EDD loader can work to load very large data sets in faster than a normal, create commit steps.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Brian. All right, I know we sort of stepped a little bit outside of the Enterprise 7 conversation there at the end, but I think still good content. All right, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I think it's probably safe for us to call this session over. We really appreciate you attending the session live, and hope that you're getting excited with us for EQuIS 7 to be released shortly. As always, if you have any questions or comments, or if you'd like to present a case study, or if you have an idea for an office hour, you can email us at officehours@earthsoft.com. And thank you so much for attending, and we hope that you have a wonderful remainder of the week.